you ever heard that you are fearfully and wonderfully made by the God of the universe?
Yeah, told it straight out.
You are not ordinary. You are extraordinary.
It was awesome.
Well, what do you want to do? And the girl says, I don't know. What do you want to do?
He was very honest. Yes, straight to the point.
Let me talk about the big masturbation question, okay? Man, it's really hot up here.
I thought it was so great. It was awesome.
Eva keeps sending questions my way, and I can guarantee you those are the good ones.
It's information everyone needs.
If the God of the universe, who fearfully and wonderfully created you, if he has that idea about you, don't you think it's about time that you have that idea about yourself?
Hi, we're at Frontier Ranch, Young Life's beautiful property in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. In just a minute, you're going to meet a friend of mine, Mike Ashburn. Well, we all call him Ash around here. And he's going to talk about some temptations, some challenges, some difficulties that kids today have in dealing with dating and sex. You know, I bet a lot of things that he says today are going to be new to you. And some might even be a little embarrassing. Because, you know, Ash gets frank when he needs to. So adults, you might want to watch this tape one time first, and then use discretion in showing it to younger teens. Well, we better get inside now. You know what? This might just change your life.
Welcome to the Sex and Dating Seminar. And some of you may not know this, but my name is Mike Ashburn, and everybody just calls me Ash. And I tell you, I am so glad that you came. We are going to have a lot of fun today. And I really hope that you gain some insights into sexuality. I know it's a big topic for you as teenagers, so without further ado, let's get going. All right, what we need to do right now, everybody take off your clothes. We're going to get a big naked pile right there. Just kidding, just kidding. You know, when you came in the door, everybody got a piece of paper, and you were going to have a chance to write down any question that you have about sexuality. Any question at all. But just let me ask you this. As the seminar is going along and you've written down a question, if Eve or I happen to answer that question, well, don't pass it forward. Just, you know, just keep it right there in your lap. I'd like to introduce to you my wife of 15 years. We have 4 children, and she is my best friend. Eva, would you stand up and say hi, please? The other thing I want to tell you right away is, you know, I was joking with you earlier about being a sex expert, and folks, that is not true. Eve and I, we have no kind of a degree. We are not trained counselors or anything. And as a matter of fact, you know, we have 4 kids, so you know we've had sex at least 4 times. So, but the reason we do this, hey, I told you I was going to be vulnerable, all right? You know, the reason we do this is because when we were teenagers, there was someone in each of our lives, we really didn't know each other then, but there was someone in our life that was honest with us. And for me, I was on a weekend camp, and my youth pastor, he and his wife, we were sitting there at a picnic table, and it was just a bunch of guys sitting around, and I think we asked a question like, hey, like how many times a week do you guys like do it? Okay? And we were just kidding around. And folks, I tell you, it was so neat because he looked us right in the eye, and he just answered the question. And for about an hour, we just sat and we just asked questions about things that we were always wondering about that no one was willing to talk about. So the reason Eve and I do this is because we really care about you. And we know that you're in a point in your life that is so awkward because you're looking for all kinds of answers, and sometimes it feels like there's nobody to ask the questions with. So that's why we do this. The other thing I want to make perfectly clear is this, that this seminar is based on biblical principles. And you know, many of you may have thought a lot about God. Many of you, maybe this week is the first time that you've ever heard the amazing love story. And folks, we don't want to cram anything down your throat. We just simply ask that you hear us out. And you decide for yourself, hey, does this make sense to me? Just ask yourself the question. With the guidelines that we're going to lay out for you, hey, is this right for me? You know, when you begin to talk about sexuality, and in this seminar, anytime I use the word sex, I'm talking about the act of sexual intercourse. And the Bible is very clear about this, that if you are having sexual intercourse and you aren't married, that's wrong. It's a sin. It's a sin like any other sin. It's no worse or better, however you want to look at it. And folks, sin separates us from God. So just let me start like that. I don't want to apologize to it. I owe it to you to tell you the truth. If you're having sex and you're not married, that's not what God has in mind for you. But I have a feeling that maybe you have heard that before, and that you came here today to find out, how far can I go, Ash, and still be okay in the eyes of God? Like, is it okay if I'm naked but she's not? Is it okay if she's naked and I'm not? Is it okay if we're both naked but we just sit across the room and talk to each other? And you know, those are great questions. And I promise you we'll answer them for you. So the Bible is very clear that sex before marriage is wrong. But you know what? Everything else, it's not necessarily so clear. And that's some of the things we're going to take a look at. You know, first of all, the whole idea of sexuality, I'm embarrassed to tell you that, you know, probably more than any generation, you guys have been lied to about sex. A huge, big travesty of a lie. Because every day you're inundated with the whole idea of sexuality that's given to you on movies and songs and magazines and billboards. Folks, I just really want to be honest. I do not think that this is an exaggeration. All of it is a lie. Because, folks, nothing, no magazine, no movie, no article, no picture that you have ever seen in your life can come close to describing to you how wonderful and awesome sex is. You know, I look forward to it so much for all of you. It's this incredible, wonderful mystery. And yet, as soon as somebody says sex, everybody kind of tightens up. Oh no, we're talking about sex. Well, what do you think God thinks about sex? I want to tell you, God loves sex. He loves it because, you see, God created it. Sex is no accident. You think Adam and Eve just bumped into each other in the garden and went, whoa! You know, it's no accident. It's no accident that things fit together so perfectly. You see, the God of the universe, He created it. And He created it to be enjoyed in the confines of a marriage relationship. That's what God has in mind for you. So I want you to know that God does not think sex is dirty, and neither should you, because God is the author and perfecter of sex. You know, there are many of you who are sitting here right now who have incredible guilt about sexuality. You know, one of the things that Eve and I hope so much for you is that your image of sex could be changed forever. You know, the goal for me today, for you, is that when you walk out that door, that your life could never be the same. Because, folks, if you really hear what I'm telling you, it's just like the message the last 2 nights we've heard. It is the best news that you will ever hear in your life. Have you ever heard that you are fearfully and wonderfully made by the God of the universe? You are not ordinary. You are extraordinary. And all the magazines, they lift up the upper 0.1% of society. And you look at that and you say to yourself, man, I must be ordinary. Folks, you are not ordinary. Do you know that in Genesis, that when God created the world, it says that he spoke things into creation. Folks, he spoke these mountains into existence. He cast the rainbow across the horizon. He splashed 1,000,000 stars across the sky. And he said, it is good. And then he made you. Male and female, he made them. In the image of God, he made them. Do you know that there is nothing in the universe that bears the image of God like you? Nothing compares to you. You are not ordinary. You are extraordinary. You're so extraordinary that when God got done creating everything that he created, you know what he said? He took a second look. And because you were in the picture, he said, it is very good. Hey, folks, what is your idea of sex? You know, when Eve and I are having sex, when we're making love, I want you to know, a nuclear bomb could go off in the backyard, and we wouldn't know it. Because part of sex is this. No, I can tell you that is not true. You know, part of the mystery of it is this, that a whole lot of what sex is all about, that maybe you've never thought about, is that it's 2 lives becoming one. You know, it's so beautiful, it's so incredible, I don't even know if I can talk to you about it. But in some wonderful and incredible way, because Eve and I are married, Eve and I are like having sex right now. The 2 have become one. Hey, what is your image of sex? You know, in my lifetime, I have been given 6 gifts that go beyond expression or compare. One is that Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins. The other 4 were that when my children were seconds old, I held them in my hands. The umbilical cord was still attached, and I looked at them in the face. Under all my little kids' nose, there's a little valley. That's me. I have a little valley right there. And I look in Melissa's nose, and Megan, and Morgan, and Michael, there's a valley. The umbilical cord is still attached, and I'm saying to myself, the God of the universe allowed me to take part in creation. Folks, that's a lot about what sex is all about. Is that your image of sex? Or are you just playing with each other? Are you just drawing lines on each other's bodies and reducing each other to sexual objects? Hey, I want to tell you something. You were never created by the God of the universe to be a sexual object. You were created to be a loving subject. What's your idea of sex?
Ash really understands how tough it can be to draw lines in relationships. I hope you learned something about yourself and about God. You won't want to miss the next segment as Ash talks about where to draw the lines in sex and dating. See you then. Get ready. You're going to hear some of the greatest news of your life. Ash is going to tell you how to set boundaries in your relationships, and he'll give you some great advice about dating. It's time to get down to business and get specific. You won't want to miss this.
Let's talk about communication in dating. Let's talk about honesty and not playing games. You know, part of the lie that you're inundated with every day is that you're told on a regular basis that who you are is based on the clothes that you wear, the way you look, the people you hang with. And so immediately in our dating relationships, we just kind of play games. I know I did it. Like, for example, you know, once the date is all set up, many times we'll spend all day kind of getting our bodies and our faces ready. We cover them up with clothes and makeup. And, you know, I used to, like, wash my truck, and I would put cologne down the carpet by the heater, so when I turned on the heater, you know, the truck would smell, you know, really good, things like that. And we begin to play all these games to convince the other person that we're this somebody that we really aren't. Isn't it interesting? And it's like nobody is talking. All we're doing is putting on a face. We're playing games. So, folks, one of the first things that I want to encourage you in your dating life, whether you're going steady with someone or you have never gone out with anyone, is one of the first things you've got to convince yourself to do is be yourself. Don't play games. You know, and it's like the world's worst hypothetical date might be this. You know, the guy goes and he rings the doorbell. He's been working all day to get ready. And the parents come to the door, and it's a little bit like Leave It to Beaver. Hello, Mr. Haskell. Hello, Mrs. Claskell. You know, Mr. Etiquette. And then the girl maybe comes down the stairs, and you begin the long trek to the vehicle, okay? And the guy is thinking to himself, how might I get her to sit next to me? You know, those are some of the thought processes that are going on. And I used to play all these games. Like, I always had a pickup truck, and I would lock the passenger side door. And I would go to let the girl in, and I would push a button. Oh, man, I am so sorry that's locked. Let's just slide around. And so that would force her to get in on the driver's side, and it would increase my chances that she wouldn't slide all the way across and sit by the window. And I would do things like I would pile up books and guns and dogs and things like that over there. And my favorite all-time ploy to get the girl to sit next to me was I'd say, hey, do you know how to shift? Well, just slide right over here and I'll show you how to shift. And so then you begin to drive, and then you all maybe have all been on a day like this. The silence is a little bit uncomfortable. Nobody knows what to say, and then the guy goes, well, what do you want to do? And the girl says, I don't know. What do you want to do? And then stoplight after stoplight, the question goes back and forth. What do we do? What do we do? And then we decide on the world's worst first date, a movie, where you sit for 2 hours and communicate intimately. Folks, I want to encourage you. Don't play games. Talk about everything. And folks, as a general rule, if you can't talk about it, you can't do it. If you can't talk about it, you shouldn't be doing it. Now, folks, just because you can talk about it, it doesn't give you permission to do it. Hey, guys, have you ever talked to a girl about what it means to hold hands? Ladies, what would you think if a guy asked you permission to hug you or kiss you? Do you hear that, you guys? You know, I was the world's worst dater, guys. I did not know anything. But folks, when Eve and I began to date, we began to talk about things. It took me 4 months to get the courage to kiss her. And you know what? I had dated a few girls before Eva, and I was the kind of guy that I just fell head over in heels. I thought I was going to marry 2 or 3 girls before Eva. But guys, finally I got it right. And I told Eva that when we started dating, hey, you know what, Eva? I have said I love you to other girls, but I want you to know what it means to me. And I said, I will never say I love you, Eva, until in my heart I can say, will you marry me? So folks, for 4 months, you know, she didn't think I was this weird duck who didn't know how to do anything. She knew that what I love you meant was special. She knew what it meant for me to hold a hand. She knew what it meant to hug. Do you guys hold hands with just anybody? Is it something special to hug each other? Do you just kiss anybody? Talk about what it means. I want to beg you, if you want a fun and exciting dating life, I want to ask you, be yourself. Don't play games. Talk about everything. Okay, let's talk about asking out. Okay, ladies, here's a hypothetical situation. And remember, I won't call on you. If you could be asked out, now guys, please, pick the ears and get ready, okay? Because you are going to find some nuggets that you'll want to take home with you, all right? Ladies, if you could be asked out any possible way, I'm saying any possible way you'd ever want to be asked out, what is your favorite way to be asked out? Just say it out loud. If you in person, face to face, never in a note. Guys, did you hear that? Face to face, person to person. Folks, I have done this seminar with probably close to 10,000 teenagers. It's always the same, face to face. So you don't like having 4 or 5 of his buddies kind of back you up against the locker and say, hey, here's a note, check 1, I like you. Okay. Well, what's a good way to ask out? Guys, let me just kind of tell you how I struggle with that. And man, I struggle with it so bad. But ladies, you need to realize how hard it is for guys to ask out girls. Because you see, we are very afraid of the N-word. No. Because it hurts so bad. You see, God created us to be the initiators. And so when we initiate and we get like slam dunk, it hurts, okay? And our ego, you know, we have an incredible ego. It's the way we're fearfully and wonderfully made. That's not a bad thing. So, like for instance, ladies, and maybe you guys are like this, I used to like dial the number. You know, I hardly ever had the courage to ask her out in person. And like the phone would ring and I'd hang up before, you know, she got on there. Or, you know, I would get her on the phone and then guys, I would start with the world's worst start. Here it is. Hey, what are you doing Friday night? That's the worst start because it kind of puts the lady on the spot. It could be that she'd really like to go out with you Friday night, but maybe there's some plans that she has with her family, but it seems so awkward to tell you no. Maybe you're the last thing that she wants to see Friday night. And so we're placed in an awkward situation of coming up with lame excuses like, well, you know, I really need to give my dog a bath Friday night, sorry. So folks, maybe you could try something like this. this is what really helped me. Face to face, I would look her right in the eye, and I'd say, you know what? I'd really like to take you out sometime. Do you think that might be a possibility? Whew, there it is. It's out. Short, sweet, to the point. You know, I'd really like to take you out sometime. You think that might be a possibility? Now, ladies, please, on behalf of all my brothers over here, there is only two possible answers to that question. Yes or no. Not maybe. Yes, that is a possibility, or, you know, I don't think so. Okay, now guys, tell me the truth. If the answer is no, do you want to know it straight up? Yes. Don't want to be drug around by your nose hair 6 months, do you? No. So ladies, yes or no? Like to take you out sometime, you think that might be a possibility? Yes or no? And ladies, if you say yes, then inside the guy's going, oh yeah. All right, now guys, if you do get the yes, relax. Don't let her see you sweat. No, I'm just kidding. No, be yourself, but then you come back like this. Well, what would be a good time for you? And ladies, you name the time, we'll be there. Right? Yes. Okay. Now let's move on to another situation. Let's talk about saying no. You know, many of you have probably already been in situations that are really scary. You know, you're with someone, they begin to touch you. And folks, I want to really encourage you. The time to decide how to say no is not when the lights are out and you're laying on top of each other, bumping up and down on each other, okay? That is not the time. So ladies, let's set up a hypothetical situation. Let's say that you've been dating a guy for a really long time. You really love each other. Everything is just going great. It's late at night. You're at your house. You guys are laying on the couch. And all of a sudden, the boyfriend that you've been dating for 6 months, you realize that his right hand is on your left breast. There it is. The move. He wasn't like reaching for his Coke can and giving you the brush job. I know all your tricks. Okay, now ladies, if you're gonna say no, what's a good way for you to say no? You can just yell it out if you'd like to. No. Any other ideas? I think I heard machete. Okay, let me tell you folks what happened to me when that happened to me, okay? And it wasn't Eva, but I really loved this girl, and I tell you, we were in youth group together, we would pray together and things like that, but I thought our relationship needed to go to the next level. And frankly, ladies, I always wondered what one of those felt like, okay? Because, and you know what? Wait. And you know what? I'm embarrassed to tell you that. But ladies, you know, you need to know a simple fact that ever since, you know, we're little, guys just talk about that. In the locker rooms, I mean, we're inundated with the idea that someday you're going to get to touch someone. And so this incredibly unhealthy curiosity begins to, like, rule your life, it almost seems like. So anyway, I touched her. It wasn't gross, it was innocent, but I touched her. And folks, this is so cool. You know, she could have done a lot of things. She could have grabbed my hand and said, "You are the grossest, most disgusting thing I've ever seen." She could have pulled out a machete and whacked off my arm. But she grabbed my hand, and she pulled it away, and she said, "You know, there's nothing I'd rather do than this. But what do you say we go bowling?" That's what she said. And you know what's great about that? my ego was intact, and yet the answer to the question was perfectly clear. No. Okay, now ladies, let me just say a word of caution. You know, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I know that the day is coming very soon when all that's going to happen. And folks, ladies, I want to ask you on behalf of the guys, and I hope this is good advice, that if you are ever in that situation and you realize that, hey, this is it, and I want to say no, for 1/1,000,000th of a second, assume the best. Assume that he is doing that because he loves you and because somehow, some way, that he thinks that this is going to make it better. And just assume the best, but then please say no, and it's not just your responsibility, but unfortunately, it comes down to the ladies saying no so many times. For 1/1,000,000th of a second, assume the best, and then say no and make it absolutely clear. And ladies, please hear this. After having said no, if that guy makes one move towards touching you again, you need to break up with that guy that night. You deserve so much better than that. That guy is a turd. And he needs to be flushed. Okay? All right, guys, let's talk about a hypothetical situation for you. Let's say you've been dating your girlfriend 6 months. Man, you guys love each other. Everything is going great. It's dark. You're laying on top of each other on the couch, and all of a sudden you realize that your girlfriend's right hand is on your penis. Now, how are you going to say no? They're not going to say no. Because, ladies, unfortunately, at that moment, every dream in life has come true. But that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it right. You know, as a matter of fact, you know, it's important, guys, that you think through that. Because I believe that's a real probability that that might happen to you someday. You've got to think it through, too. How are you going to say no? The night before I went to college, I was really in love with a different girl, you know, head over heels again. And all of a sudden, we are out in this cornfield, like parking, making out. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, we read the scriptures together. We had such a warped idea, like we would pray together and then we'd get naked. I mean, it was sick. So, folks, please don't rationalize with your prayers that you can thank God for each other's bodies and then, like, get naked. I mean, that doesn't make it right. So anyway, it's the night before college, and guys, I tell you, for the first time in my life, I realized that if I wanted to have sexual intercourse, I could. There it was. You know what? Something that I thought about since a little guy. You know, something that consumes our imagination. Folks, there it was. My dream had come true. You know, it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. I was scared to death. And you know what? I learned from my friend. I grabbed her hand and I smiled at her and I said, believe me, there is nothing I'd rather do than this. But you know, deep inside, I've promised myself that I want to wait until I get married to have sex. And you know what? She was just as relieved as I was. You know, touching is a big deal. I think it's the greatest tragedy in high school that we touch each other the way we do. Guys, do you realize that when you touch a girl, that you have her soul in your hands. It is a big deal. 1 Corinthians 7:1 says this, guys. It says, it is good for a man. It is good for a man not to touch a woman. You know, I got to be honest. It doesn't say that it's wrong if a man does touch a woman. But folks, the model that is lifted up is not to touch. So guys, if you love her, if you say to yourself it's really love, then how about not touching? It is good for a man not to touch a woman. Saying no. Folks, please think about it before the situation arrives. You know, this is going to be earth-shaking news to you, but men and women are different sexually. You heard it here first, okay? And you know what? That leads to all kinds of tragedies. So for the next couple minutes, ladies, I'd like to explain to you kind of how men operate sexually, and guys, the same thing. I'd like to just discuss with you a little bit how women operate sexually. Folks, I've been married for 15 years, and it's still a wonderful mystery. But as a general, broad, overall statement, sexuality for women is a very emotional and heart thing. And it doesn't mean that it's not a physical thing, but women approach sexuality different. Now for guys, sexuality is a very visible and physical thing. It doesn't mean that it's not emotional, but it's kind of how we approach it. And folks, what I want to tell you is that sex is much, much more than just like jumping in and out of the sack with each other. In some kind of a wonderful and mysterious way, I said it before, you know, sex begins when I wink at Eva in the morning, or when I come up to her as she's doing the dishes and hug her and hold her. It's much, much more than a physical thing. Okay, but we're different. And because we don't understand each other, and because we don't talk about it, it leads to an incredible tragedy. Like, for example, ladies, I don't know if you know this, but this is how fast it takes for a guy to be ready physically for sex. Okay? On your mark, get set, go. We're ready. And you may think, oh man, that's gross and disgusting. And it could be that you're with a boy and you realize that he's fired up. Maybe you realize that the boy you're with has an erection and you're thinking to yourself, uh-oh, here it comes, I'm in trouble. And you know that's not necessarily true, because men's bodies produce sperm all the time. Okay? And there's only a couple ways that sperm can leave our body. It's either through sexual intercourse, it's through ejaculation, or through a world-famous thing that we call nocturnal emissions or wet dreams. And you kind of wake up and you think, oh, great, perfect, wonderful. Ladies, the guy's sex organ, though, is not between our legs. It's between our ears. And folks, we can get fired up about sex anytime. It can happen in algebra class. It can happen in church. You just kind of grab a hymnal and kind of lay it there on your lap. Anytime. Because you see, our imagination is what gets us ready for sex. And so, ladies, you may say to yourself, well, you know, I am no supermodel. You know, I don't look like anybody in those magazines. Well, folks, what's really wild about that is our imagination can take care of any flaw that you think you might have. And so you may be wearing clothes that guys are looking at and saying, touch me. Maybe you're wearing clothes that say, touch me, to a guy's imagination. And like, for example, this, ladies. If I was a woman, I would not want to wear a bra all the time either, okay? It seems to me that they'd be hot, they'd be cumbersome, and I'm not telling you it's wrong if you ever, like, don't wear a bra. But I do want you to know this. virtually every single time that you don't wear a bra, we know it. And that begins all kinds of thought processes, okay, that I'm talking about. And you're sitting there thinking, well, hey, I'm just not that good looking. I don't see how he could possibly read that in. But folks, it's true. We approach things very visually, very imaginatively, and very physically. Okay, now the opposite side of the coin is this, guys. It's like you're sitting there thinking, man, she is just not interested in me at all. You're sitting there thinking, man, I am so fired up, I feel like my heart is going to blow out of my chest. I cannot believe how excited I am. And it's like she could care less. You know, women approach sexuality slower, warmer, tender, emotional. So folks, know how you operate. But folks, here's the tragedy that leads to. Guys will give the emotional in order to receive the physical. And women will give the physical in order to receive the emotional. Guys will say, I love you, in order to get sex. And girls will give sex in order to feel love. Folks, that's a tragedy. Hey, if that's happened to you, I'm so, so sorry. Because that's never the way that the God of the universe had it in mind for you. You are so much more special than that. Guys and girls are different. You know, maybe you're on a car date. You're riding down the road. The guy has got his arm around the girl and he's driving along. And maybe the girl just has her hand right here. Okay? Sitting next to the guy, the girl has her hand right there. It's not up here, it's not down there, just kind of right there. And the girl is probably thinking, puppy dogs, butterflies. This guy is so cool, I love him so much. Ladies, do you know what the guy is thinking? Ah! So please, please be careful and know that you're different sexually. Okay, so how far is too far? How far is too far? Is it okay if one of us is naked but the other one isn't? Okay if we're both naked and we just talk to each other? Is it okay if we go outside the clothes Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, underneath, above the waist, Tuesdays and Thursdays? You know, how in the world do you begin to answer the question, how far can I go? Well, unfortunately, our answer, and the answer that I picked, I didn't know any better, we began to draw lines on each other's bodies. How ridiculous is that? And yet we all do it. Folks, the second you allow yourself to draw a line on your body, you have reduced yourself to a sexual object. You're a toy for somebody else to have control over. Folks, sex is not about control. It's about giving up everything for the other person. So, folks, that's not the answer. Folks, the answer is this. The guidelines that Eva and I would like to offer up to you is this. How far can I go before I get married? Here it is. Kissing, hugging, and holding hands. And that might be too far for some. And you guys are sitting there thinking, brother, you are from outer space. Hey, I'll ask you the question I started with. Does it make sense? Folks, I have talked to many, many teenagers who have adopted those guidelines. All the troubles start after kissing, hugging, and holding hands. I have talked to teenagers who have adopted these principles as a result of coming to this seminar. Years later, they've come back and they've said, Ash, kissing, hugging, and holding hands, it worked for me. On my wedding night, I didn't feel guilty. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if on your wedding night that neither one of you had ever been touched by anybody else? That you had not been naked with anybody else? Folks, is it a dream that you're willing to pursue? Hey, let me tell you, I am 139 pounds. My legs look like flamingos. You know, I'm nothing special to think about, to look at. You know, I'm extraordinary. I'm not ordinary. But if you would line me up against all the guys in the world, you know, I physically may not stack up to everybody else. But I want to tell you, the other gift that I received, the sixth gift, is when I was 25 years old and my wife was 21. On our wedding night, Eva gave to me the gift of her virginity. And I gave her the gift of my virginity. Neither one of us had ever had sex. You know, I had done just about everything else you could possibly imagine. But folks, neither one of us had ever had sex with anybody else. You know, that makes me feel like King Kong. No one in this universe has ever or will make love to my wife. It's me and Eva. The two have become one. Kissing, hugging, and holding hands. And that might be too far for some. Because you see, if you all like hold hands with the idea that you're going to get in their pants, that that's just step one, well, that's too far. You know, the other part of the story is this. I have never met anyone, not one teenager, has ever come to me and said, I've gone farther than kissing, hugging, and holding hands and not experience guilt. All the guilt begins past kissing and hugging and holding hands. So folks, think about it. Think about adopting the idea that you are going to try as hard as you can to adopt the principle in your life of kissing, hugging, and holding hands, and that might be too far for some. Philippians 4:9 says this, for the things that you have heard and learned and seen and received from me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Folks, I want to promise you, if you will adopt these guidelines in your life, you will experience God's peace. I promise you. I give you my word on that. See if it doesn't make sense. You know, you're sitting there, you've heard a grown man talk about the mystery, the beauty of sex. You've talked about, you've seen a grown man almost cry when he talks about, you know, his children. And you're sitting there thinking, hey, great. You know, that's really good for you, Ash, but for me, it's too late. You know, statistics would say that more than half of you have had sexual intercourse. And you know, the wild thing is that all of you look like virgins, and yet statistics would say that more than half of you have experienced that tragedy that we've talked about. In fact, statistics would say that a good number of you have had many sexual partners, and you engage in sexual intercourse on a regular basis. And you're sitting there thinking, man, I wished I had never come to this seminar. Well, folks, please listen, because I am going to tell you again the best news that you have ever heard in your life. God's forgiveness is so complete and so total that it's like almost too wonderful to grasp. He removes our iniquities. He removes our sin as far away as the east is from the west. Do you remember hearing that verse? He removes the blot completely. You know, it's so important, guys, that you grasp it. You have got to understand the miracle of God's forgiveness. You know, I love crisp white shirts. And you know, you get them off the shelf, and when you break open that plastic seal, sometimes I almost imagine in my mind it going, I've broken the seal. And I get this white shirt, and I put it on, and man, I'm looking so good. And everybody goes, hey, Ash, new shirt? Yes, sir. You looking good, Ash? Don't I know it? It's just so perfect. And then because I have 4 kids, one of them like blows blueberry grits on me or something, you know, and I get a stain. And I think, oh, rats. And so I give it to Eva, and she does everything she can to get this stain out of the shirt. And I get it back, and it looks pretty good, but we decide, you know, it really needs something else. So I take it to a professional dry cleaner, and they do everything they can to get that stain to come out. And when I get it back, it looks great. And I put it on, and people go, new shirt, Ash? Yes, sir. You're looking good. Don't I know it? But you know what? If I look real close, nobody else can see it. But if I look close, I can still see the outline of the stain. You know, folks, that's the way sex sin is. Only you and one other person knows about your sexual sin. And maybe you tried to hide it and cover it in all kinds of ways, but you still know. Well, folks, God's forgiveness is so complete that He not only removes the blot of the stain completely, He gives you your shirt back in its original, unbroken seal. That's not as a result of anything that we do or who we are. It's because of the coolness and the completeness of God's forgiveness. Do you get it? He gives you your shirt back. It's in its original wrapper. Folks, if you're here today and you've had sex and you ask God's forgiveness, He forgives you. And in God's eyes, you are a virgin. If you ask God's forgiveness, you are a virgin. Is that not the best news you have ever heard in your life? You're forgiven. Hey, if the God of the universe, who fearfully and wonderfully created you, if He has that idea about you, don't you think it's about time that you have that idea about yourself? Think about it. Does it make sense? Kissing, hugging, and holding hands. You know what? Nobody ever told me that. All anybody ever told me was don't have sex, Ash. That was a guideline that I was given. Don't have sex. You know what? I live by that guideline. I live by that guideline. And folks, there's incredible guilt and pain that I have carried into my marriage. I lived by those guidelines, and it didn't work for me. I hope the guidelines work for you.
Hey, I promised it would be great, didn't I? Ash knows what he's talking about. He's lived it, and his advice is as solid as the rock I'm standing on. The next segment is where Ash answers tough questions from people like you, and he gives the honest answers that you've been looking for. Catch you later. you're in for something special. Next, you'll meet Ash's wife, Eva, and together they'll answer real questions from real teenagers. And these are the questions that everyone wants to have answered about sex and dating, but most are afraid to ask. So hang in there. You'll be glad you did.
Because we're going to hit the big ones. Eva, I love you, honey. And I promise you, if I get any questions on oral sex, masturbation, then I'll just pass them your way, okay? You guys will probably notice that Eva keeps sending questions my way. And I can guarantee you those are the good ones. Let me talk about the big masturbation question, okay? Whew, man, it is really hot up here. Okay, let me talk to the guys first, okay? I'm just going to kind of pretend the girls aren't there. First of all, masturbation is sex with yourself. For girls and boys, it's where you take your hand and you manipulate your genitals to a point where you bring yourself to climax or excitement. So that's what masturbation is. And guys, I want to tell you, I really struggled with masturbation. And I masturbated a lot. I am talking a boatload, okay? So, the main thing that I want you to know is that I used to be... Eva's leaving me. You know, you make sure, please, that you are not out there thinking, man, I am the only person in the world with this problem, okay? I must be so weird. I'm the weirdest duck in the world that I'm struggling with this. And folks, that's not true. And I've heard a joke that 98% of all guys masturbate and the other 2% are liars. And, you know, I think that's funny, but you know, a good friend of mine came up to me after a seminar, and I believe him, that he had never masturbated, and I believed him. But I just want you to know you're not weird, you're not dirty or gross, and that is a very common thing, you know, among men. So that's the first thing I want to tell you. The second thing I want to tell you is I believe the goal is to stop, okay? And I began to, like I would be, some practical things that would help me would be, you know, instead of just laying there thinking about things, I would physically get out of bed, I would take a walk, you know, all kinds of little things that will help you stop masturbating. And folks, I want to tell you, if it was just a physical act, I don't think masturbation would be wrong. But for me, there's always a fantasy. There's always a thought process that goes on. And I believe that, that the Bible teaches that that's where the problem is. So folks, you know, fantasizing, masturbating, I believe that all of a sudden you can wake up someday and realize that masturbation is controlling you instead of you controlling masturbation. And guys, if Jesus was, you know, sitting right here, I believe he'd say this, guys, I'm so sorry. I know that is so tough. And as a matter of fact, back in the Bible times, most guys would probably be married by the time your age. But here you are at the time physically of, you know, maybe your sexual peak, and you're not married, so you can't have sexual intercourse. And so I know it's a real wild temptation. So don't feel weird. Don't feel ugly. Don't feel dirty. But folks, commit with your heart that the goal is to stop. And you know what? I want to tell you this. I used to think, you know, the temptation to masturbate was probably going to stop when I get married. And I'll probably never masturbate after I get married. And guys, that's not true. It's not true. I still have had temptations to masturbate. So there's the scoop. As best I can tell you, as honestly as I can tell you, that's masturbation. Now, ladies, you know, guys get all the press on this, but I've done a lot of research and reading, and, you know, it's the same message to you. If you feel like you're struggling with masturbation, you need to know you are not weird. You are not a sicko, that you are not, you know, not one of a million. You are not the only person who struggles with it. So I'd say the exact same thing to you, and I'd also say the goal is to stop, and I would say exactly the same thing that I'd say to the guys. So it's kind of a, you know, an idea that no girl ever masturbates and that all guys masturbate. And I'd say that both of those are equally false. Anything to add to that, dear?
Yes. Just, I think the percentage of women who even experiment with that kind of thing is so small. And so if you're a young woman out here today thinking, well, gee, it never even entered my mind, that's good. But, you know, you're reading weird magazines, and there's stuff in there, and it's gotten more and more and more prevalent in your generation. And I just think typically that is something that is very uncommon for women, and especially if you are not sexually active. If you are not into a lot of heavy petting, or if you're not having sex with your boyfriend, you're not really going to have a desire to masturbate. So don't give it any thought at all, really. That would be the best call. If you really love somebody and you plan on marrying and you're only with each other, why isn't sex okay then? That's a really good question, because a lot of people will say, well, you know, once we get engaged, then it'll probably be okay for us to have sex because we're getting married pretty soon anyway. But more than 50% of all engagements break up. I mean, I didn't even know that until a few years ago. So think about that for a minute. You know, you've already bonded with this person physically and intimately and connected in that way that should only be saved for marriage. And then your relationship dissolves, you know. I think probably the answer to this is no. Don't do it. You'll regret it.
This question says, what makes men attracted to big breasts? And, you know, to be honest, I think initially, you know, that certainly catches our eye. But to be honest, you know, I don't think any guy, any man would ever, you know, when it comes right down to it, would never ask a girl out just based on something like that. That as we look at women, certainly that's a part of your physical body like any other part that we, you know, would notice. But I think the absolute answer to that question is it's really kind of sad. It's kind of sad. It's the way our society points to us about, you know, what's important. So, ladies, I apologize for that. It's not supposed to be that way.
Is it wrong for a girl to ask out a guy? I don't think so. What do you think, ladies? No. Guys, how do you feel about that? No. Okay, there's your answer.
You know what? I talked to my pastor about that, and you know, there is a precedent laid out in Scripture that men were created to be the initiators, and so there's, you know, some question about that. But you know, I just don't know the answer to that. So I think that you ought to search your heart, and I've seen it work out really good that way. I've seen it work out great for couples when girls ask guys out. So
here would be my only addendum to that, is that I think that it's not a very good idea for women to get it into their heads that they are to ask men to marry them. And I know a lot of you probably think I'm a big prude, but a man in Scripture is laid out to be the spiritual leader and the provider for his family. And I just really think, ladies, that we've got to wait and be patient and let them fulfill their God-given role. And if we are leading all the time, you know, that doesn't leave them any place. So that would be my only stipulation on that.
can you get AIDS from oral sex? And I believe the answer to that question is yes. And if I know there's a doctor in here, maybe you can, you know, tell me if I'm wrong. But yes, you can, because that is an exchange of bodily fluids. You can get all kinds of sexually transmitted disease. STD means sexually transmitted disease. And AIDS is probably the most famous one, but there's all kinds of sexually transmitted diseases. And folks, let me tell you this. You know, if you have been having sex and you suspect that you might have a sexually transmitted disease, you know, it is so important that you see a doctor, because that can have an impact on your ability to have children later. And I mean, it can really have an effect on your immune system. You need to get medical treatment and a medical diagnosis on a sexually transmitted disease. And this question says, if you have been forced to have sex and you are worried about having STDs and you want to get checked out secretly without a parent involvement, where could you go? Folks, there's all kinds of things you can do. One of the things I'd like to recommend is that you go to a trusted friend who's older than you, an adult. You know, I don't know if a pastor makes sense to you, or maybe you're a young life leader, but folks, please don't wait for someone like that to come along. You have got to be proactive. There are all, I think a worst case scenario would be there are all kinds of numbers that you can call in the yellow pages. Call someone like that you respect and just say, hey, look, I have an anonymous question. What do I do? So, okay, a lot of local health departments will give anonymous tests. And so, yes, that's very, very easy to get done, in case you are wondering about that.
What does the Bible and God say about rape? I think that God weeps when he sees the way that we behave down here. And I just want you to know that if you have ever been raped or know someone that has, you are a victim. You are not responsible. You are not to feel guilty. You are not to feel like it was your fault. You are the victim. And I really want you to talk to someone about that today if you can, maybe your leader or someone. And, you know, that's sin. That's the world twisting sex into something ugly. And I'm really sorry about that.
You know, one of my questions was if you are a victim of rape, are you still a virgin? And the answer to that question is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. You didn't give up anything. Somebody tried to take something away from you. And God is so cool that nobody here on earth can take that away from you without his permission. So if you are a victim of rape, you are still a virgin in God's eyes, and you ought to see yourself that way too, okay? Okay, is French kissing a sin? You know, I think it can be. I think holding hands can be a sin. I think the way we look across the swimming pool at each other can be a sin. But if you're asking me about, does that fit into the guidelines that Eve and I would lay out, I'd say yes. Kissing, hugging, and holding hands, and we would include French kissing in there. And French kissing, for those of you who don't know what that is when you put one finger in your ear. No. That's just when you use your tongue a little bit.
What does God say about Christians dating non-Christians? Another really good question. When I was a young person like y'all, I would have said that it was okay. I was a Christian, but I thought anybody I dated, boy, you know, I was going to convert them or take them to church, or, you know, at least I'd pray for them. But I think there's a real danger in that. And years later, when I was leading Young Life Club, like some of your leaders are, I radically changed my ideas about that. Because I think that anybody that you date is potentially someone that you're going to marry. And that it is wrong for us to be in a marriage relationship with someone who is not of the same faith that we are. I can't even imagine what marriage would be like if we didn't have the same goal and the same faith and the same purpose. So I'm going to say, please be careful, because I think for women, we get very emotionally attached. You have found this, ladies, that you date for a while, and before you know it, there's no turning back. You are connected to that guy in some mysterious way. And when you break up, there's a little piece of you that kind of goes with them. And so I think that's the danger in dating non-Christians, if you are a believer.
Okay, question says, is it normal to have 3 testicles? Well, if you're a woman, definitely it is not normal. You know, I've never had that question before. And I'd have to say, if you have 3 testicles, you are extraordinary. But you know what? The fact remains that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You're just the way you're supposed to be. Relax. Don't worry about it. If it was a problem, you'd have known about it by now, okay? So just relax. Okay, this question says, if you know that God will forgive you and you have sex anyway after this, will he still forgive you? okay? And the answer to that question is no one knows how wonderful and incredible and how many times God forgives you. Jesus said 7 times 70. And the whole idea is this, that there probably is a cutoff. There's a word called blasphemy in the Bible that talks about that there's a point where God knows that you don't mean business anymore. But you know, none of us in this room can be the judge of anybody else on how many times you can be forgiven. Okay, but my question is this. Your friendship with Christ is a loving friendship. Why in the world would you want to do that? Why in the world would you want to ask forgiveness for something and then, like, keep doing it? I mean, it's like on our wedding day, I took a vow to Eva that I was going to be her husband. And I tell you, all the joys and the wonder and the mystery, all those things that brings is just a miracle. How stupid would it be for us to wait and be so excited that day to come and for us to say, I do, and then for me to say, okay, listen, Eva, I'm going to check out. I'll be back in 3 or 4 years, okay? You know, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to do that? So, folks, God knows your heart, and don't play around with forgiveness games. I hope I answered that question right. If I get an erection and I don't want to have an erection, how can I make it go away? That's a great question, because the guys find ourselves in situations like that sometimes. And you know, I just try to think about something like Grandpa's funeral or something like that. So it's your thought process, guys, that helps you out. There was another question about oral sex. Oral sex is not just like talking about sex. Oral sex is sex with your mouth, where you would manipulate each other with your mouth, and you've heard the terms like blow job and things like that. That's what oral sex is. And someone asked if that was wrong, and folks, there's not a scripture that, you know, I can't tell you, you know, 1 Corinthians 5:1 says no oral sex, but I tell you, that is way, way, way beyond the guidelines of kissing and hugging and holding hands. And folks, if you're having oral sex with each other, I want to tell you, the truth is, in order to get your sexuality under control, you are probably going to have to break up with each other for a while. And if you are having a lot of trouble touching each other, you have gone past kissing, hugging, and holding hands, and you are going to leave this room thinking, hey, how can we get a handle on it? I'm going to tell you to talk it through, pray it through, and be willing to do something wonderful and radical, like take a step back for a little while. So, you know what? You've been a great audience, and the truth is we'd love to sit here with you all night, but we're out of time. And, you know, on my American Express card, it says Reverend Michael J. Ashburn. As wild as it sounds, you know, little Jimmy and Josie, I am an ordained minister. And if you would permit me, I would like to say a blessing over you. And the blessing is just simply a closing prayer. And it's a closing prayer just for you. May the Lord bless and keep you. And may his face shine upon you all the days of your life. May you get a vision, a God vision for your sexuality. And may you follow the Lord all the days of your life. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Well, that's it. I hope you've caught a glimpse of God's love for you through Ash's presentation. As Ash says, sex is God's idea. And he has a plan for you, your life, and your relationships. Thanks for taking the time to hear him out. For Ash and Eva, I'm Greg Hunter. See ya.